Tonight, did hate hit a mosque in Mississauga?
People are very shaken, and there's a lot of disbelief, a lot to process.
Police say a man brandishing a hatchet discharges bear spray at a mosque. Investigators are probing the alleged incident as a possible hate-motivated attack. We'll show you how the Muslim community is responding tonight. Plus,
we want to bring the reality of war to people's daily lives.
The latest demands from Toronto protesters in support of Ukraine as the Russian invasion intensifies, especially in the besieged city of Mariupol. And
it's been so long since we've been able to be with our weirdos and dress up and have fun.
Comic-Con returns to Toronto. We'll show you the Hollywood heavy hitters who came to town and the wacky wardrobes that filled the convention center today.
This is CBC Saturday News.
But first tonight, taking you to Mississauga, where police are investigating whether hate was behind an attack at a mosque. Several worshippers suffered minor injuries after a man armed with a hatchet and bear spray derailed a prayer service this morning. Let's get right to the scene now with Lorenda Redekop and how the community is coping.
This would have been such a frightening time for people who were worshiping inside this mosque. It happened during early morning prayers, and we're told that there were around 20 people inside at the time. A man walked in. He was brandishing an axe and bear spray, which he started spraying around. Some of the men who'd been praying, they then jumped into action. They tackled the man and held him until police arrived. The National Council for Canadian Muslims has been supporting this community. They spoke outside, and we asked how people are doing.
Obviously, people are very shaken, and there's a lot of disbelief, a lot to process. Just the level of, potential violence that could have been caused here today, if it wasn't for those very brave men who did what they did in everyone's kind of time of need.
Luckily, there were just minor injuries, and it was just from effects of the bear spray. And hours later, we're told that inside the mosque, people were still experiencing the effects in the air from the bear spray, but it has been dissipating. In terms of the motive, that's really unclear at this point. Police have charged a 24-year-old man from Mississauga. He's named Mohammed Moise Omar. Police say they are looking at everything, including whether this is a potentially hate-motivated crime. At this point, though, that's still unknown. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Mississauga.
Despite all these unknowns, we're continuing to track more reaction to this incident tonight, all the way to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And in a tweet, he wrote the attack is incredibly disturbing, and he strongly condemned the violence. He wrote he's keeping the community in his thoughts and applauded the courage of those who were there this morning. Premier Doug Ford also tweeted his support for the community, saying there is no place in our province for such evil and hateful acts. A quick pandemic update for you now. And as the burden of COVID on the healthcare system generally across the province continues to be reduced, there is particular concern tonight in one northern First Nation. The federal government is sending the military to Deer Lake First Nation to assist with a COVID-19 outbreak. According to the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority's website, Deer Lake currently has 203 active cases out of an on-reserve population of approximately 1,100 people. Minister of Emergency Preparedness Bill Blair tweeted earlier today that the Canadian Forces Rangers are going there after a request from the Ontario government. Now, Deer Lake First Nation is nearly 600 kilometers northwest of Thunder Bay near the Manitoba border. Now to the latest developments from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The United Nations has raised its estimate to 847 Ukrainian civilians killed during the conflict since it began. That includes 64 children. David Common is part of the CBC's team on the ground in Ukraine and has a wrap of all the day's developments, starting with Russia's punishing attack on Mariupol.
The city of Mariupol in the south could well be on the verge of collapse. This would be the furthest that Russian troops have got in any major city since their invasion more than 3 weeks ago. There is now reportedly urban warfare, shooting in the streets right in the city center, according to the mayor of that southern strategic city. Why is it strategic? Because it lies between the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia annexed back in 2014, and areas to the east that they invaded a little more than 3 weeks ago. This would allow them to control a vast area, potentially land more troops by ship from the Black Sea and drive them further west and then north into places like Odessa and potentially the capital of Kiev. Kiev continues to sustain enormous bombardments, as has Mariupol. Reportedly, 90% of that city either hit or destroyed at this point, left in many cases in utter ruins. It's very hard to defend an area that has been essentially erased from the map. Meanwhile, Russia claims it has used for the first time in this conflict hypersonic missiles. Those travel at 5 times the speed of sound and are therefore very difficult to shoot out of the sky. They claim to have struck a weapons depot in a city south of our position here, an area where MiG fighter jets by the Ukrainian Air Force have been operated. Villagers in that area aren't confirming what's happened. In fact, some dispute that there has been a missile attack there at all. Nonetheless, it shows a potential willingness on the part of the Russians to use more of their available arsenal. David Common, CBC News, Lviv, Ukraine.
Back here in the GTA, people across the region are continuing to mobilize to show their support for Ukraine through donations, sending supplies, and protests calling for peace. As Talia Ricci reports, the efforts range from large-scale organizations to small groups coming together to raise awareness.
Food hampers and medical kits being packed by volunteers in Toronto will make their way to Ukraine and surrounding countries.
So imagine a bucket like the ones over my shoulder, filled with about 20 pounds of grains and rice and buckwheat. We know Ukrainians love buckwheat, so we're putting all these items in, sealing the bucket. It'll be air freighted up, driven across the border, and then gotten to families that are in tough-to-reach areas.
It's just one of the many efforts underway in the GTA to help Ukraine. The Canada-Ukraine Foundation says to date, over $5 million in aid has been delivered to the country. The Canadian Red Cross also continues to collect donations for its Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal. Alexander Kostenko is working with Razom for Ukraine to get supplies on the ground.
A lot of medical supplies, splints, tourniquets, hemostatics, that kind of stuff. The first few weeks were just about gathering everything and figuring out the logistics for when things would eventually arrive. But very glad to report that the first things have already arrived. They're already on the ground. They're already saving lives.
Negotiation, not escalation.
In Toronto, efforts to raise awareness about what's happening continue through protests big and small.
It is to awaken public consciousness in our world that is so busy. You have a million things. And you may hear about it like on social media or in the news, but we want to bring the reality of war to people's daily lives.
Kostenko says it's difficult feeling like his family is a world away, trapped in a war zone. But knowing so many people outside of the Ukrainian community want to help brings hope.
I think a lot of us here feel that we aren't doing enough, that we can always do more, and that no matter how much we do, it's not going to be enough. It's going to be too slow. What did surprise me was the degree to which, again, the Canadian public and the publics around the world have bought into this effort. That has been, again, surprising and very inspiring.
He hopes the momentum continues. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning now to a labor dispute that may grind some things to a halt. Canadian Pacific Railway says it is going to lock out about 3,000 unionized employees early tomorrow morning. And that's leading to a lot of concern for industries that rely on the rails. Marina von Stackelberg has the story.
If there's no deal, essential shipping across Canada could come to a screeching halt. The Union for CP's engineers, conductors, and other rail employees have voted to strike. There are more than 24 sticking points, including wages, benefits, and pensions.
Full of some nice red spring wheat.
Grain farmer Chuck Fossey is worried. He needs this grain shipped out of this bin.
Could be a while before I get this grain hauled out to the elevator.
Fossey is also a member of Keystone Agricultural Producers. It's an advocacy group for Manitoba farmers.
I know many elevators right now are quite full, and they're waiting for trains to start coming in and moving the grain out of the elevators so farmers can haul more grain into them.
CP's biggest shipment is grain. Almost half of what the rail line transports across Canada and the U.S. includes grains, coal, and fertilizers. The supply chain relies on these products being shipped year-round right before they're needed. So grain elevators like these need to be emptied.
Anytime something comes along to disrupt the grain movement, that impacts our reputation as a supplier of quality grain in a timely manner to importers around the world.
Canada's manufacturing industry could also take a hit in its reputation, especially as the pandemic has made getting raw materials from overseas to Canadian factories so difficult.
And now, on top of everything else, the last thing we needed was yet one more nail in the coffin, so to speak, and the rail strike, or the potential strike coming up on the weekend is we just can't believe that this is happening.
Farmers like Fossey aren't just worried about their grain leaving the farm. As spring arrives, they'll also need fertilizer, chemicals, and spare farm equipment parts delivered. They're all shipped by rail too. Items more important after record drought decimated last year's crops across the prairies. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Starbuck, Manitoba.
In Hamilton, 4 people are dead following an early morning collision. Police say a stolen vehicle was traveling at a fast speed and lost control.
The driver lost control of the vehicle, mounted the curb, and struck a concrete hydro pole. During the collision, the driver and the vehicle struck 3 pedestrians, and the debris caused from the collision struck a 4th. As the vehicle came to rest, it was engulfed in flames. As a result of the collision, 4 individuals have succumbed to their injuries.
Police have not yet identified those victims, but 3 pedestrians and the driver of the vehicle died. It happened just before 2 this morning near Main and King Streets. And at this point, police are not sure if there was a chase that led up to the collision, but the investigation is certainly ongoing. And this was the scene earlier today in Etobicoke at Lakeshore Boulevard West and 27th Street. Police say a vehicle crashed into a vacant storefront. No injuries were reported in that one. Now to some sad news coming out of the Toronto Zoo. The zoo has announced the death of a 17-year-old rhinoceros. You're seeing pictures right now of Asha Kieran, or Asha as she was known to staff. According to the zoo, the rhino's health had been on the decline since the beginning of the year. Staff say that she had become lethargic and wasn't eating, and they ran a number of tests, even performing surgery, but nothing revealed an answer as to what was affecting the rhino. So the zoo decided to euthanize her on Thursday. Asha was brought to Toronto in 2006, and during her time in Toronto, she gave birth to 2 male rhinos. That's the video that you're looking at now. And in a release, the zoo says she was a special part of the Toronto Zoo family and will be very missed. All right, now for a look to the skies, and Sophia Kambalia is joining us. And it was difficult to see much today. I was down at Woodbine Beach, and there was quite a lot of fog again.
Yeah, the fog's really been the theme this past work week. Chris, did you know that on average this past week, we were actually foggier with lower visibility in Toronto than they were in foggy Atlantic St. John's, Newfoundland. So you weren't alone. 6 degrees, we're still above the seasonal average. We had a really nice taste of spring on St. Patrick's Day with all those 20-degree days. We will still be above seasonal, but still keep that low visibility as we head into the overnight period. Look, only about 400 meters of visibility in front of you in places like Peterborough. With this heavy rain continuing into the overnight period in bursts and starts as we bid adieu to winter with this Texas low. First day of spring tomorrow, 11:33 Eastern. We welcome it in. We could welcome it in with a few thunderstorms as well for people in places like Niagara region and Kingston. You're just on the northern edge of all of this risk stateside. It will end into the overnight period, and then we pick up a northeast flow. Much of the rain has already fallen, and we could see a little bit of lake effect snow for one last kick at winter into the early morning hours Sunday, but it won't be a washout for the big first day of spring tomorrow. You might even see a really nice clear sunset and some sunny breaks into the afternoon. More on the first week of spring coming up.
All right, good. You're making me a little bit nervous there when you're talking about snow, Sophia.
One last little bit.
All right. The Persian New Year is upon us, and we caught up with folks at a family-run Persian grocery store in Richmond Hill.
Celebration of spring and celebration of new beginning. So egg represents fertility and new beginnings, so it gives us the motivation to continue the new year with new hopes, a fresh start, and new growth.
Oh, love that. And as you can see, lots of decorations. It was filled with music and, of course, traditional foods. The official New Year will happen at 11:32 tomorrow morning. So that's a look at the festivities in one store in Richmond Hill, but the holidays traditions are quite wide-ranging. Zara Premji takes a closer look.
Whether it's through dancing, singing, or devotional recitations, the Persian New Year marks the arrival of spring.
It's basically a day where we would recommit ourselves to the principles, the ethics of our faith.
Called Nowruz in Farsi, but Navroz in Ismaili Muslim tradition, and Nowruz for the Baha'i. It's celebrated at the time of the vernal equinox, falling on March 20th or 21st, when night and day are equal length. But depending on which community you belong to and which country your family may be from,
it's the same celebration, but everyone celebrates it in a completely different way.
For the Persian community, there's a half-sin table on which 7 specific items whose names start with the letter sin in Farsi are set out as symbols of prosperity, health, and happiness. And of course, there's fire jumping.
When you jump over the fire, it takes away all your sadness, it purifies you, so that you start your next year with no sadness, with no problems, so that you start your year the right way.
For Ismailis, there are Iranian Ismailis, but also Afghan Ismailis and Indian, Pakistani, and East African, and so on and so forth. So aside from prayers, contemporary celebrations and meals bring their own flavor.
Often we would have parazi and mandazi because we're Tanzanian. So that's like a cardamom coconut donut and a stew of pigeon peas and coconut and cilantro.
And with the Baha'i, it's similar. Depending on where you and your community members are from, the festivities may vary.
Our celebrations are as diverse as our community.
But the act of giving is a focal point for the day, as well as fasting for 19 days from sunrise to sunset. And as the day approaches and the celebrations begin, the greetings may differ amongst communities.
Navroz Mubarak.
Happy Nowruz.
But the meaning stays the same. Zara Premji, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Supervillains, be warned, today may not be your smartest day to wreak havoc in Toronto. Plenty of superheroes are roaming the downtown today. Toronto's Comic-Con convention is back after 2 years of a hiatus, but it sure didn't disappoint.
It's me, Mario!
I'm Batman.
Darth Vader.
I'm the Mandalorian.
She's Hawks and I'm Villain Hawks.
I'm Jinx from Arcane. I made it myself. It took about 3 weeks, I think.
We are the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
The Recruits one. We got the cardboard here.
And it's incredible the amount of work that goes into these costumes. People spend weeks, sometimes months, putting together almost movie quality costumes, and you'll see them all here this weekend.
And who are you supposed to be?
So excited.
This is actually my first Comic-Con.
Me too.
This is my first time coming to the Comic-Con, and I find it pretty cool.
I'm really excited.
You guys, first time?
Yep.
And what do you think?
I think it's really nice.
I'm really excited. It's been a long time since I got to go to the convention. It's been almost 3 years.
This is fantastic, getting out, seeing everybody, and having all the kids take pictures with me.
Great, especially with this pandemic, and I'm so happy to see people, because in life you can't live without people. So I get that instant gratification. It's nice that everybody gets a chance to get out of the house, come to the show, have fun, than just sitting home and be isolated.
Yes, it's been a huge challenge. We haven't been able to come together. These events are driven by passion. They're driven by community.
It's been so long since we've been able to be with our weirdos and dress up and have fun.
I missed it so much, and I'm just so happy to be back. We haven't set foot in the door yet, and I'm just I'm pumped.
And the good times keep on rolling because St. Patrick's Day celebrations continued today as well. After almost 2 years of restrictions, clearly Torontonians are eager to get back out there. At the Polson Pier today, a sea of green for live bands and Irish dancers.
We dress up in green. We wear four-leaf clovers, necklaces, all that stuff.
It's our favorite thing to do.
So it's been a long 2 years, and I think everyone's really excited to get back out and be social.
All right, so don't check your calendar. St. Patrick's Day was technically Thursday, but events are booked throughout the weekend, even into tomorrow, when Sunday's St. Patrick's Day parade will take place, and it's going to mark the first parade the city has seen since 2019. All right, but here's the question. What will the weather be like for that big parade, Sophia?
Well, we're seeing lots of green on the map. It's in the form of rain. It'll be earlier in the day. Yeah, I see what I did there. It'll be earlier in the day. The rain will continue into much of Sunday, though. For those of you in the nation's capital region and into eastern Ontario, clearing later in the day. But for the traditional snowbelt regions, here's a look at that 5 to maybe even 10 centimeters of snow that you'll have on the back end of today's Texas low. Some nice clearing, though, for everybody in the south in behind the system. You may even see a nice sunset for the first day of spring. Around the freezing mark in the snowbelt regions, that's why you'll have that wintry mix. But then in the afternoon, you warm to a really nice 10 degrees, especially in the south. That's about 5 degrees above the seasonal average. Pretty nice for the welcoming in of spring, again, which happens at 11:33 in the afternoon. Some will be spending the first day of spring on flood watch. I don't expect this to get further heightened into flood warning for any of you in some of the low-lying waterways that were worried with the ice jams and the melt. We will hold on to the above seasonal conditions with a nice drying out and sunshine for Monday. Back down to seasonal for Tuesday. Enjoy the dry weather while you can, because some really typical spring-like weather for the rest of the long-range forecast. Not days and days on end of rain, but a weak upper trough will mean some showery days, some cloudy days, days full of muddy dog paws, worms, and singing robins, and all the things that we should enjoy this time of year. So a pretty typical first week of spring, first day of spring will be Monday, about 5 degrees above seasonal and plenty of sunshine. Until then, we still have this really low visibility and heavy bursts of rain that we're watching right into the overnight, Chris.
Those double digits. Thanks, Sophia.
We'll keep them as long as we can.
No kidding. And that is our show for you tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. And as we go to break, here's a bit more from the St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Remember, you can catch up on all your favorite CBC content on cbcnews.ca. Have a great night.